Hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. As you know, I scour the earth to find the best people in their industry. And, this time I found somebody, but I had to travel all the way to Phoenix, Arizona for it. So, Jamie Taets, how are you today?
I'm wonderful.
Good. You are the Chief Vision Officer, whatever we're going to unpack what that is, and founder of Keystone Group International. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Do us a favor real quick and just kind of help us understand what Keystone Group International is.
Yeah, so it's a professional services firm that's focused on the small and mid-market. So helping entrepreneurial organizations grow and scale is really where we look. And so we talk about kind of three legs of the stool that need to be balanced for really good scalability. A really good strategy, right? Knowing what your strategy for your business is. And this year has been a unique one in deciding what your strategy is in your business and how to adjust. Leadership and people, right? Understanding how to utilize the talent that you have and maximize it. And then culture. And so finding the balance between those three is where your competitive advantage really happens. And so that's how we work with business owners and business leadership teams.
And I know that you're really into the culture piece. And I think that a lot of entrepreneurs are getting beat over the head in the last, I'm going to say maybe 10 years with that, because I think back to when my parents were, in the workforce, and it was like, culture wasn't really an issue. Shut up and go to work. The corner office was the boss and you didn't dare go in there. So, there's been a ton of transition from, that workforce, I'm going to say, Jamie, to this one. What have you seen? Have you identified any reasons for that you're aware of?
So I'll tell you our perspective on it, because we do so much of this work. So first off, I want to start with defining culture, because it's a really tough one for people. People know what the word is, but it's kind of an overused term, right? As you say, as people have been beat over the head with it. We define culture as a place where people come in every day or leave every day better than when they came in.
Okay, great.
Right? So just simplify it down. Do we bring our employees in and do we build them up throughout the day, right? And we help them and they grow and they have significance, and then we send them home in a positive place to their families.
But you know what, Jamie? I'm going to challenge you right away. I pay them, so what the heck?
Right.
I mean, you must get that.
Hair on the back of my neck. Right. So
I knew that would work, so that didn't take long.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Right. So that's the difference, though, is if you look at the around culture and why I think it's shifted to your first question is because we're studying it and they're starting to see tangible business results that they didn't used to see because they didn't really have the studies. And so when you look at the average performance of employee, they give you about 40% of what they're capable of. Like the studies have proven. So as I talk to clients, like you might as well just burn a pile of every single day, right? Because your performance, you're losing that from your employees. And so where the culture piece comes in, and I know we talked about that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? That Peter Drucker, and everyone nods their head and kind of chuckles about that. But what we're starting to see is the competitive advantage to the business result is whether or not we are tapping into the resource that we have already, right? Okay. We're really tapping into the strengths of people, and the generational changes is driving that.
Okay.
And when I talk about, right, so I have a great grandmother who is 104, still living. And I talked to her about this because she's with it, which is not a lot of 104-year-olds that still can have these type of conversations. For sure. And we talk about the generational changes. She's like, we've been going through this through history. She's like, imagine what the generations thought in the 60s and 70s, right? When those aged, they were like, oh, all is lost. Like we're screwing up society, right? Like and you start to think about at a core level, the values of the generations are not different. It's just the beliefs and how they shared their values that are different. Okay. That's what we see in the younger generation, the boomers that ask the question, I pay, so we need to care about this, is that the values aren't vastly in what they want. The boomers just were taught to just job, soldier on, get a paycheck, right? Keep your head down, do your job. And I think the generations that we're seeing now come into the workforce with the millennials and Gen Z weren't taught that same thing, taught to share how you feel, right? Platforms
Okay.
here that they can share how they feel every moment of every day. And so I don't think their values are different. They want a lot of the same things. They're just not afraid to ask for it.
Okay.
That's my perspective.
Yeah. And so, and I'm way back on your 40% because I think there
Yeah.
was a really hidden gem there that I want to bring that make sure that the listeners get and that I learn more about what you just said. So,
Mhm.
if I'm understanding what you said, most people on a team in a corporation, small business, whatever, they're operating at about a 40% efficiency rate or capacity. I don't know what word you
Of
use,
what
but
they're, yeah, of what they're capable of,
okay.
right? They're showing up. And because if you look at like the exit interview data of why people are leaving
Yep.
companies, they're leaving. One of the top three reasons is a lack of an ability to use my strengths every day,
Okay.
right? So they're telling us I'm showing up and I'm doing stuff,
Yep.
getting stuff done, but you're not tapping into my full potential is essentially what this is saying. So we've got resources. It would be like if you're a manufacturer, right? And you only
Mhm.
use one of the three manufacturing, machine every single
Okay.
day. You would never do that in a manufacturing environment.
Sure.
But yet we're not tapping in, and the reason is leadership. We don't know how to tap into the strengths and how to really get the most out of people to motivate them, and that's what culture is motivating people to do more, with even in the midst of what we're dealing with right now, right? With
Hmm.
crises and a
Sure.
lot of business dealing with.
So I just want to make sure that I get this because
Mhm.
if I'm hearing what you're saying, I mean, this doesn't cost, usually, this doesn't cost a lot of money. We've already paid for the salary, we've already paid the compensation package, we've already,
Right.
done all the heavy lifting at the front end. So basically, we're talking about somebody that just kind of, I think of the Gallup poll where it shows about 1 in 3 people show up to, work every day engaged.
Right.
And which means about 2 out of 3 people aren't really actively engaged in what they do. And so my goal is to try and figure out how to find those, how can we get those people to row? Because there's
Right.
only 3 out of 10 people rowing that boat, right? These
Right.
are free things. That's what I think so cool about this, Jamie, is you're talking about things that we've already paid for. We're just trying to figure out how to improve their use, so to speak. And I don't want to disrespect a
No,
team member in any
how
way,
to
but
harness the power
yeah.
of what we already have. You're spot on.
And so then how do you fit into that at Keystone Group International? Let's just say I'm listening right now and I'm like, that makes total sense. I have a team of X number of people. And if I could, 40 seems maybe low for my group. I'm going to say I have a blind spot, which most of us do. And I think,
Right.
oh, I'm probably at 75% efficiency or
Yeah.
whatever, right? So how do I get them up even further? What happens when Jamie jumps into our group? Kind of walk us through what
Right.
goes on there.
And there's a little bit of a diagnosis, right, that
Okay.
needs to happen there, because you gave a perfect example of, I think it's 75% and I might have some blind spots, because oftentimes with organizations that we come into, they're too close to it. So they think things are fine. They think things are great. When we really dive in and baseline, so we talk a lot about baselining your
Okay.
culture, is interviews, focus groups, surveys. Like we gather a lot of data and we baseline it so that you understand the areas where you're strong and the areas where you're weak, because then we have the self-awareness to say, okay, we really do need to work on these areas. It's not all broken, but there are certain areas we need to work on. Whereas leaders, right, leaders come in every day trying to do their best too, right? But we have a lot of leaders that are also working managers and are down trying to get stuff done, and they don't necessarily have time to lead. And a lot of that harnessing of the power comes in the leadership piece.
Okay.
That's what a lot of companies have realized they've had to go remote. Is we've seen, it's the reason our business is flourishing right now, is because so many of them have gone and have had this realization that we thought our leadership was better and stronger than it actually was. And when we had to go remote, we just realized they aren't as great as we thought we
Sure.
were. And now they have that self-awareness,
Okay.
and they want to start looking at it. So it's a diagnosis and a baseline. We have to have that to start from, because otherwise it's subjective, right?
Sure.
And we,
Sure.
we we don't really know if we get the lift or not.
So if I'm interested in that for my company, it sounds like a lot of work, number one. And the last thing that I have right now, Jamie, is time, right? That's
Mhm.
probably what people are thinking
Right,
as they're
right.
listening to this right now, because we see this a lot
Mhm.
where, like you said, they're working owners, they're working entrepreneurs, they have many hats in their business. And it's like, if I got to add another one,
Right,
and I think as my job as a coach, when I get involved with companies, I try and explain that I'm trying to take work away. I'm
correct.
trying to simplify life. I'm assuming that's how that works for you. How do you get people past that initial hump of, oh, I don't have time to even think about this right now?
Right.
How does that work for you?
It's very typical, exactly what you're saying. So a couple of things. We simplify it. So there is nothing overly complicated. In fact, I'm not a fan of the overcomplicated models, and which is why we developed our own for culture,
Hmm.
because we want to simplify it to something we can all understand and we can make progress on. So I think that's the piece. Because the moment you throw something complicated at an entrepreneur or a business owner, it's like I have other things to worry about. But if we can simplify it to something they understand and they can wrap their around, there's more chance they're going to take a step towards it. And that's really our goal. The second
Gotcha.
piece is to help them understand it's a journey.
Okay.
The average time to shift a culture is 3 to 5 years. I know
Wow.
that scares, right, people to that listening, but we're not achieving perfection here. There is no such thing. So it's start on the journey and then do it at a pace that your organization that you can withstand, right, and
Sure. Sure.
sustain.
Yep.
And that's where we come in. Is the diagnosing is don't do what somebody else is doing. Like do what's the most important, and will give your organization the biggest lift. And I think that frees them up a little bit to feel like, okay, we can do this. We just need to be structured and focused around it.
Sure.
So I think by simplifying it and then being a little bit focused, it helps from a budget standpoint. It helps from a time standpoint. But what I'll tell you is companies that choose to double down and invest in this right now have a competitive advantage over the next 5 to 10 years. There's
Sure.
no doubt when you look at the data.
Sure.
And I get a lot of questions about smaller companies, right? Like, are we too small for this? I've got a few employees,
Yep.
or I've got less than 10 employees. And the answer I would give them is there's two options. Again, because we're diagnosing, we're not going to put something on you that we would put on a 300-person company,
Sure.
right? But you have two options. You can build a solid foundation now and grow on that, right? So you've got a scalable business, or we can come back and you can pay us to unravel the spaghetti later.
Hmm.
Because you're probably pay for it one way or the other. And it's just, do you want to pay for it
Sure.
when things are broken and your culture's deteriorated, which a lot of organizations are dealing with? Or do you want to start to set that foundation early,
Right.
right? And build it in the right way. And so it's a mindset
Yeah.
shift, really.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, I was on your website and I was looking at some of the testimonials, and I love when I see a guy say, we were over complicating
Right.
this,
Right.
and so when you say simplify, my ears, as a high D and disc, my ears are like all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, this
We can
is,
be quicker,
yeah,
easier. Right.
how do we, now that you got my attention, it's like, okay,
Right.
if we can get this done in 10 minutes, we're in great shape, Jamie, which, I obviously can't do.
No,
But I think that looking at trying to improve that 40%, because even if it is 40% or whatever your number is, every 5 or 10% that
huge.
you can increase, I gotta believe that you're paying, it's actually less to pay you than it is to just continue at status quo at 40%.
Correct. And then add turnover,
Yep.
right? The cost to replace somebody, 1.5 times their salary, which most people tangibly don't think about.
Right.
So there's just all of these intangible costs that add up as a company is trying to grow, that they don't relate back to culture. But if they were to focus there, right? So the analogy that we give is a perfect analogy for everybody is you've got a dandelion in your yard, right? You walk out, you see a dandelion this time of year, not so much in the Midwest, but you know what I mean. Um,
Yep.
and your first, idea is like, oh my God, they're so ugly. Like, I'm going to mow them down, right? That's the easy thing. They're gone. You feel good. You're like, okay, they're gone.
Yep.
But
Yep.
they're not really gone, because they're going to come back and they're going to probably have multiplied. So they're going to have friends. The same thing happens in our businesses, is unless we dig to the root of what's happening, those same issues are where we're spending 80% of our time, is putting out fire after fire after fire, but we never slow down to fix the root. I believe the culture is the root of a lot of the issues that you're dealing with. So when
Yeah,
you talk about saving time in the long run, I mean, it's a little bit of blind faith, but you've got to believe that if you dig to the root and start fixing that, there's 100 less things
sure.
that you're going to have to deal with over the next year
Yeah,
because you focused on the right root.
that's awesome. Yeah, that's so cool. And I think about the day a person gets hired. They
Hmm.
start in a new position and they're all shiny and desk is clean and everything is just put exactly where it's supposed to be. Maslow's has that hierarchy of employee engagement, and there's 5 levels. And I'm guessing that most people start right in the middle where they're almost engaged. Most
Right.
people, when they're hired, they're not thinking, man, I can't wait to, start screwing off. I can't wait to put in as little work as possible. I really think that the first, X number of days, weeks, or months, people have this engagement about them, this
Right.
excitement, this freshness, right? As that wears off, I think that's where leadership comes in and really plays a strong role in continuing the growth and development of that. If I'm a leader, but I don't know how to lead, where do you come in then in that situation, Jamie?
Well, so, and this is something, there's a lot of leaders that are thrust into a leadership position because they were really good at what they did, right?
Right,
And now you're the leader of
exactly.
the team, and we don't give them the skill sets. So it's really not their fault,
Right,
but as leaders, so the analogy that I'll give you is, so sports. So let's say the game of basketball. When you're in, let's say, elementary school, the gym teacher has a checklist of skills to the game of basketball that they need to teach you. They
sure.
need to understand the ball, right? Like how it's played, like those kinds of things. When you go out for the team in middle school, the coach helps you understand your strengths in the game, helps you understand the strategy of the game,
Hmm.
and coaches you within your strengths to be better in the
Right,
game. That's the difference between being a manager and being a leader.
sure.
Right? A leader is there to kind of coach and help. I was actually talking to a coach who also does some leadership training just earlier today. And he said, my only job is to help people love the game. And I think that's how leaders should think about it is
Sure.
my
Yeah.
job is to help you love it here and love what you're doing. And if not, let's give you something else, right? Let's challenge you in a different way. But my job is to help you love the game that you're playing because you chose to be here.
Right.
And that's that sending people home better than when they came in. But
Yeah.
most organizations, not because they're trying to, bring people in high energy with lots of ideas. We suck them dry and then we send them home to their families every night,
Exactly. Yep.
right?
Yep.
And it's the opposite of what we should be doing.
Right.
And so that's when we talk about business strategy versus culture and leadership is what if we switched that and just started building people up every day? I don't think we'd have to worry about the business results.
Right.
I think
Absolutely.
those would happen if
That's so
we were
cool.
engaging people.
Yeah, and that's where I think I mean, and I don't know about you, but I'm guilty of it. I'm practicing and getting my way out of it, but there's still days I go, I have to go to work. And I'm trying to train myself into saying I get to go to work so that there's a different shift in my mind. And hopefully then there's a different outcome on the back end. But there's plenty of times where we say, I have to go to work. And
Yeah,
then you feel like, yeah, they're going to suck me dry of everything. And I'm going to have to just limp my way home. I'm barely going to make it. And then I just crash in front of the TV, eat my
right,
dinner and fall asleep, and no kids, no nothing tonight. Dad or mom can't,
right,
handle that. That's just not healthy for the family. It's not healthy for culture. It's not healthy for society. And it kind of does go back to that, the leaders concept of what work is like. So
right.
do you run into a lot of those people that have that? Are you still shifting that mindset, so to speak, for
Yeah,
people?
and it's shifting the mindset about we believe everybody in an organization is a leader. So when we're
Mhm.
talking about leader, it's somebody who has direct reports, but really everybody. And so it's how do we all have a part in this culture? Because the misconception with culture, and for any entrepreneur or business owner that's listening, is your job, you don't create the culture. No matter how hard you try, you don't get to control it.
Sure.
You get to impact it. And it's a big shift for a lot of leaders because control means I declare this is what our culture is, and therefore it is. And the answer is it's not because the culture is made up of all of the threads, all of the people, and they're all equal.
Okay.
And so our job as leaders is to have a positive impact on that culture. Like, what things are we doing to move it in the direction that we want it to be, not try to control it and say this is what it is. And I think when we let go of the control, that's when the culture can actually start to grow and evolve in a positive way, but we have to be focused on it. And that's the piece. And so I don't think leaders show up wanting to send people home like that.
Right.
I think we all are just dealing with so many issues day in and day out that we don't have the time to focus on caring for each other.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think is society right now, right? Where people are craving that care
Sure.
and that love, where people actually, give a crap about them and want to help them be
Yep.
better.
Yep.
And we're not there in a lot of organizations.
Sure. Absolutely. And are they aware to the blind spot question? Do you think more and more people see where they are, they're self-aware of where they are, but they don't know how to get there? Or do you still run into a lot of people that just, number one, they are not self-aware, and quite frankly, they don't really care? I mean,
I
what
think
are you seeing out in the workforce today?
there's a bit of all of it. We tend to not work with the clients that don't care, so I don't see as many of them. We
Sure.
won't work with them.
Yeah.
But if they right, and they want to get better, which is the self-awareness. Like, I don't know what I don't know, so teach me,
Sure.
kind of thing. Right? That's what you're seeing. Those are the people you're really seeing, especially during this pandemic. We're talking about leaders have been born in the
Sure.
last 10 months. People that you didn't know were strong leaders have
Yep.
risen, and there's been a lot of people that have been exposed as they didn't have the fundamental leadership skill sets that we needed to continue at the team.
Sure.
And so that the ones who were kind of born and are open to learning new things and open to, wow, I've never really thought about this before. There are a lot of those leaders. Because again, I don't believe people show up to make other people's lives miserable,
Yeah.
ever. I think something happens that causes that. And that's the root that we have to
Sure.
fix when we
Yeah.
talk about the root. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that for the most part, I mean, there are some low EQ people that really are, and I always liken it to driving. And obviously, we're not driving as much as we used to, but, I still drive to clients 4 or 5 days a week, actually, pretty much every day. I have somebody that I'm doing something for, and in the car, and, you're merging into the freeway. And for whatever reason, the high EQ people are like, oh my gosh, it's your turn. Go ahead. Right. Low EQ, I tell you, that 25 feet of space that they feel they got to have, is their space, and there's no way in the world they're giving that up.
Right.
And some people just have bad days. I get it, and some
Right.
people are oblivious, but there are some people that really know that they're doing it, and they feel entitled to that piece.
They do.
So, so the entitlement piece, when you are talking with people, I'm sure you're interviewing them just like they're interviewing you to see if there's a fit to do work within that organization. So how does that, I mean, have you turned people away going, we just aren't the
Oh,
right fit for you?
for
How does
sure.
that work for you?